I still remember that day like it was yesterday. That's when I came into his life. We spent a lot of time together. Life was great.
Oh, it's a package. Thank you.
But it all started to change. I knew that smile on his face. It was the same look when I was the latest tech. So I knew what was coming. It was inevitable.
You know, Samsung, I kind of miss hanging out with iPhone as well.
And as for you, the latest and greatest, your time will come. It's the curse of the tech reviewers.
This is a tough video to make. A part of this video is sponsored by trendmicro. These are arguably two of the most premium smartphones on the market right now, which is why this comparison is so hard for me. They're both fantastic, but let's be real here. Which one should you get? In terms of build, they both feel super premium. I wasn't a fan of the curved sides before. Like, I remember Samsung used to have like their phones much more curved on the side, and I found that annoying because I would have like these like ghost touches everywhere. There's been some questionable stuff that's happened, but I gotta commend Samsung here. I think the newest version with their S23 Ultra, it's much better. I'm not getting ghost touches. I think the curve isn't as exaggerated as it used to be on their previous versions. On the iPhone side, honestly, I used to like that like flat side before, but after using for a couple of years now, honestly, I don't know how I feel about it. It feels a little bit sharper and makes the phone feel a little bulkier. I think the iPhone shape has started to become a little more stale, and I would love to see a little more innovation over on the Apple front to try to bring out more exciting versions of the devices. We've had pretty much the same design for so long, whereas on the Samsung lineup, we have the folds, the flips, and multiple different versions of this phone. Overall, in build quality, I'd say they're a tie, but slight edge goes to Samsung because I do like how it feels in your hand. Next, let's talk about displays. Now, displays are a huge deal because that's your primary mode of input and output on these phones. At first glance, they both have OLED panels, so everything pops. It looks amazing. They both have these nice and large screens. They have 120 Hz refresh rate, which is an absolute must. So on paper, both of these sound pretty much similar, but overall, I'll tell you what my real world usage is like with both of these phones. There are some subtle differences. The flat panel on the iPhone feels a little more uniform with their whole dynamic island cutout up top, and it just feels a little more organized, whereas the Samsung feels like they're trying to pack as much content into the screen size as possible, which is not a bad thing. It's got a much noticeably smaller cutout up top. It's taller and more rectangular rather than the curved look on the iPhone, allowing for a better screen fill for content, and it literally bleeds into the edges to maximize content again. This again goes back to the design philosophy for both of these phones. The Samsung has a slightly sharper display coming in at 500 ppi versus 460, while the iPhone is slightly brighter, coming in at peak brightness of 2000 nits versus 1750. But I will say the screen to body ratio on the Samsung is better. It's got smaller bezels and no dynamic island up top. Now, always on display, both the iPhone and Samsung, they're great now. Initially, the iPhone used to show the wallpaper and it was absolutely terrible. I had to turn it off because it was killing my battery life. And the last thing I'll say is the fingerprint sensor. Look, between fingerprint sensor and Face ID, I will say the Face ID on the iPhone is the best I've seen on any phone. It works really well. So there are times where it gets a little bit annoying, and at those times, the fingerprint sensor on the S23 Ultra comes in clutch. I would like to have both of them kind of function at the same time so that I can use either or, because I do like the convenience of the Face ID quite a bit as well. All right, next one is a big one. Camera. Okay, there's 48 megapixels on the iPhone versus 200 megapixels on the Samsung. Is there a noticeable difference? It's arguable, but I do notice slightly more detail on the Samsung, but that's because I was nitpicking. For the average person, if you were to show side by side the photos from an iPhone and a Samsung, most people may not be able to even tell. The photos on Samsung do look a little more saturated and contrasty versus the iPhone looks a little more natural. But if we're looking at camera ability for the average person, I gotta give this round to Samsung. They just have the clear advantage here in terms of hardware versatility with their 10x optical zoom and actually somewhat usable 100x digital zoom, whereas the iPhone can't really go toe-to-toe with Samsung on this front. In real-world usage, the Samsung did come in more handy for me in certain scenarios where I was able to use that long-distance extra telephoto lens, so that's kind of cool. Where I will give the edge to the iPhone is video. I still like the video much better on the iPhone compared to Samsung, and this holds true for a lot of the phones on the market. I think the iPhones just have a special look to them where they fit in much better with my videos that I film, and I'm able to edit them much better, and it just looks a lot cleaner. Overall, I don't mind either, so I would not be upset if I had either the iPhone or the Samsung in my pocket. They both do great photo and video for the average person, but let's say I'm much more heavily focused on video, then I would prefer the iPhone, versus if I'm much more heavily inclined to photo, then I would prefer the Samsung. If you're someone like me and you're into tech, then you probably know that a lot of our lives are now displayed fully online. Between working from home, virtual learning, crypto, shopping online, hacking is at an all-time high, which is why I'm super happy to talk about today's sponsor, trendmicro. But let me tell you why trendmicro is different. Trendmicro has this one premium security suite, like an all-in-one package that they offer that gives you complete device and identity protection across pretty much all your devices. Inside this premium suite, they basically have protection for your PC or Mac with 24/7 support. If anything goes wrong, you can call them at any time of the day. They have mobile security, which gives protection for your Android and iOS devices. Wi-Fi protection, so basically they give you access to a VPN. You have ID security protection, which basically provides dark web monitoring for things like your ID, your name, and some of the details that you can provide for the software to look for. You have a password manager, which will work across all your devices, and you have premium service, which gives you help desk support pretty much 24/7 for all things technical. And here's the kicker, it can be used across 10 different devices, so basically you can hook up your entire family pretty much. Not to mention, this all comes at a very reasonable price. Like a lot of these services that I mentioned, like VPN, password protection, and things like that, sometimes you're paying the same amount, if not more, for just one of these things. I've personally been using some of their services, and what I love about it is the fact that I can have all my passwords and stuff sync across all of my devices. Doesn't matter what ecosystem I'm in, so I'm using both Android and iOS, I'm using macOS and Windows. I have access to everything across the board. And it's all super easy to set up, and I like the fact that it's a one-stop solution for everything. You don't need to go give your information to multiple different companies and shop around for different services. You can just get everything in one place. If you're interested in checking this out, then I'll have it linked in the description down below. Next, I want to talk about usage. Now, when it comes to actual real-world usage, between both of these phones, I didn't notice that great of a difference. There used to be a time in the past where between Android and, one UI with the Samsung and iOS, there was a much bigger difference, and I would struggle to use the Android phones. I gotta say, that distance has closed significantly, to the point where Samsung has really cleaned up their One UI, and it doesn't feel as clunky to use Samsung devices as it did in the past. So in actual real-world usage, much less of a difference. Now, I want to kind of talk about some of the special features in both of these phones. Firstly, I gotta bring it up. The S-Pen. I can't tell you how much I love this thing. You're already carrying around a huge phone, right? Like, these phones are pretty big, but I love the fact that there is some extra benefit to carrying this huge phone with this S-Pen. Like, you can actually use it as like a tablet to like write or draw or take notes or anything like that. It's just a little added touch that goes a long way. Fidgetability score on this ranks super high. I could do this all day. Oh, and I find that I actually use it quite a bit. Now, whether it was, editing videos in CapCut and getting a little more precision, or signing contracts, or marking up documents, or doing silly markups just to send to friends, this thing came in clutch. And not to mention, it can also function as a remote trigger for your camera. So if you want to like set up your camera somewhere, you can remotely trigger it to start recording. It's just these like little things that add to the quality of life when you're using a phone. The next point, and this one is big, and I know you guys are probably gonna argue about this in the comment section, but ecosystem. I will still personally say that Apple has the lead here, and that is mainly because of two reasons. Firstly, third-party support. A lot of companies, when they're building apps or products or anything like that, they usually first build for iOS and Apple, and then they bring it over to Android. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation when I'm using my Android phones that certain apps or certain features of products just didn't work on Android because brand developers decided it just wasn't ready to go over to Android yet. But iOS had it. This just gets super annoying. And the second reason I think the Apple ecosystem is just better is because the other products in that ecosystem, in my opinion, are just top of the line, market leading items. Like for example, iPad, in my opinion, is the best tablet on the market. The Apple Watch, it's just the best smartwatch on the market currently. And even with their computers, I think the Macs are some of the best computers on the market, especially with their new Apple chips. So I think when you couple all of those extra items, it really makes a compelling argument to be in the Apple ecosystem. But look, if we're strictly talking about first-party ecosystems that are actually developed by Apple and Samsung, I mean, Samsung's doing a great job. Like they have their earbuds, they have their smartwatch, they have tablets, they have laptops. You can still get the continuity between all of them like you can with Apple. Overall, if you're not tied to a particular ecosystem already, you could pretty much go into the Samsung ecosystem and enjoy most, if not all, of the benefits that you would enjoy in the Apple ecosystem. Now, some other special features. The iPhone, for example, has something called crash detection. It has emergency SOS through satellite, but then the Samsung hits back and they can support 45 watts of fast charging, whereas the iPhone can only do 20 watts. The iPhone hits back with MagSafe, which is something that I absolutely love about the iPhone, right? Whether you're using it with wallets or stands, mounts, or you want to mount it on top of cameras or tripods, so many innovative things you can do with MagSafe, and I think it's a great addition by Apple to their phones. And then the S23 Ultra hits back with power sharing. You can actually quickly juice up like other devices or headphones, for example. Another huge benefit with the Samsung is USB Type-C versus Lightning. I can't wait for iPhones to just bring USB-C across the board. Like, it's way overdue. And another area Samsung hits back with is multitasking features. Like, why don't we have split screen on the iPhones? It just doesn't make sense to me. So as you can see, when you're actually using both of these phones in real world usage, these little things start coming up and you start noticing them between each other. And it really comes down to which features do you prefer? Which one would you rather live with and which one would you rather sacrifice? Now, let me see if I can try to put all of my thoughts together and basically offer you guys a good enough conclusion that you can go home with and be like, okay, I learned something from this video. I can actually make a decision now. I'll preface this by saying, even though both of these phones can get super polarizing, they actually have a lot in common. A few years ago, these differences were much more pronounced. iPhones were generally considered to have an ecosystem that didn't have any competition. They had amazing battery life and usage, best-in-class cameras, a design that clearly looked and felt more premium than pretty much majority of the other phones on the market, and a super minimal, nice, clean-looking UI and software experience. Whereas on the Samsung front, it was considered to have the best displays on the market for phones, with their Super AMOLED displays that literally popped, the versatility that they had in their hardware devices, so many different options you can choose from, and of course Android, which gave you much more customizability and widgets. But I gotta say, both of these devices have done strides in order to fill these gaps over the past few years. Samsung, with their S23 Ultra, for example, gave me solid battery life throughout the day. The camera on the S23 Ultra, it's gotten really good. The ecosystem with Samsung is getting much better, and on the software front, One UI pretty much was their saving grace, helping things look more minimal and cleaner and giving a better aesthetic overall. On the iPhone front, Apple has done a lot to actually bring more customizability to their users over on their phones, or widgets for your home page, for your lock screen. You have shortcuts and different experiences for your phone that are much more customizable. The screens on the iPhone have become much better, becoming some of the best screens on the market, with their 120Hz display and their Liquid Retina XDR displays coming to their products. So both of these devices have become quite similar, and they're both pretty much at the middle. So how do you make a decision? The bottom line is you're going to be influenced by what products you're already using or you own, or other products that you may want to buy down the road. So for example, if you're thinking of eventually buying a Mac or an iPad, then you're going to lean towards the iPhone. So you kind of want to ask yourself, are there specific devices that I'm currently using or I'm going to buy? And that might help influence your decision. Look, in my particular case, it's a little bit different because I edit all of my videos on Final Cut Pro, and that's been my editing software of choice for a long time. So that makes me tied to the Mac. And also, I generally do like Macs and I think that they're some of the best laptops on the market. So once your foot is in through the door, then you add an AirDrop and continuity and the neat little features and little intrinsic and extrinsic things that Apple adds to make your user experience better. If you just own Apple devices, it just makes it too alluring for me. And that's why the iPhone will always be one of my everyday daily drivers. But luckily for me, I'm in tech, so I can have multiple daily drivers, and that's why I get to also carry around an Android phone, which is what I usually do. But like I mentioned both pros and cons for both phones. So at the end of the day, it comes down to what your use cases are and what you prefer over the other. What are the things that you're looking from a phone, and what are things that you're willing to compromise on? And that being said, now I want to turn the question back to you guys. I really would love to hear from you guys. What do you guys think? Which platform do you prefer and why? And I especially want to hear from people that have experienced both Android and iOS and why you decided to stick with one over the other. If you like this video but you're looking for a cheaper, more budget phone, then check out my video on the Pixel 7a that I did right here, and I'll see you guys there.
How's it staying on?